The laundry house behind the Blackwood mansion was, for 18 years, my prison. From dawn until my hands were cracked and bleeding, I stirred those steaming tubs, rubbed lye soap into fine fabrics, and pressed hot irons across endless sheets and garments. My name is Eliza, and in the summer of 1835, I became Charleston's most notorious figure. Not for the pristine whites I produced, but for what I did to Mistress Cordelia Blackwood in the copper wash tub, where I had spent most of my life. I was born on Blackwood Plantation outside Charleston in 1797. My mama worked in the big house, and my earliest memories are of hiding beneath tables while she scrubbed floors. When I was 8, Mama died of fever, and Mistress Cordelia, then newly married to Master James Blackwood, decided I would be trained for laundry work. The girl's hands are the right size for getting stains out, she told the housekeeper, and her color won't show so much in the wash house. My color. I was light, skinned enough that visitors sometimes mistook me for a tanned white servant, until they noticed my hair. My father, I later learned, was Master James's older brother, who had been given first pick of female slaves when visiting from his own plantation up north. Such arrangements were common enough that no one spoke of them, but the evidence lived in my face, which bore the Blackwood nose and eyes. Perhaps this was why Mistress Cordelia particularly despised me from the beginning. The laundry house stood separate from the main house, a necessity. Given the constant steam, the stench of lye, and the blazing fires needed to heat the water. In Charleston's sweltering summers, the temperature inside could rise to levels that made even overseers hesitate at the doorway. It was here that I learned my trade under old Ruth, the previous laundress whose hands had eventually become too arthritic to manage the delicate work. Keep your head down and your mouth shut, Ruth advised on my first day. The mistress inspects every piece. One spot, one wrinkle, and you'll feel the switch. 2 mistakes, and you'll feel the whip. I learned quickly, because I had to. The work was punishing hauling water, stoking fires, stirring heavy wet linens with a wooden paddle, scrubbing at stains until my knuckles bled. But more punishing was Mistress Cordelia's exacting eye and ready punishment. She was beautiful, people said, tall and willowy, with auburn hair and perfect porcelain skin that had never known a day's labor. She had been the belle of Charleston before marrying into the Blackwood fortune. But beauty doesn't preclude cruelty. Indeed, in Mistress Cordelia, they seemed to be 2 sides of the same coin. The first time she struck me, I was 9 years old and had missed a small tea stain on her favorite lace handkerchief. She inspected the laundry each afternoon, laying each piece out methodically, running her fingers along seams, holding items to the light. "What is this?" she asked, her voice dangerously soft, as she held up the handkerchief. I stood with my raw red hands behind my back, eyes lowered. "A handkerchief, mistress." The slap came without warning, rocking my head sideways and bringing tears to my eyes. "It's ruined, is what it is." She held the small brown mark in front of my face. "Do you know what this cost?" "More than you're worth, girl." That night I received no supper, and the next morning she watched as Ruth demonstrated again how to remove tannin stains. "See that she learns properly," Mistress Cordelia instructed. "She may have her father's looks, but she clearly doesn't have his intelligence." The casual reference to my parentage, the deliberate cruelty of the comparison, was something I would grow accustomed to over the years. Mistress Cordelia never spoke directly of who my father was, but she wielded the knowledge like a weapon, reminding me of my place with subtle barbs about my features or coloring. By the time I was 14, old Ruth had been sold away, her usefulness exhausted, and I became the Blackwood laundress in full. My days began before dawn. lighting the fires beneath the copper-washed tubs, pumping water from the well, preparing the various soaps and treatments for different fabrics. Collars and cuffs needed extra scrubbing. Silks required gentle handling with special cast-iron soap. Blood from nosebleeds, hunting accidents, or women's monthly courses needed cold water immediately, then careful treatment with hydrogen peroxide. I became an expert in human stains, in the evidence of bodies that even the wealthiest Charlestonians couldn't escape. I knew which gentlemen spilled bourbon on their waistcoats, which ladies used too much rouge, which children wet their beds. The laundry revealed secrets, and I kept them all, as invisible as I was to the white world around me. Master James Blackwood rarely came to the laundry house. He was a businessman first and foremost, more interested in his cotton brokerage and shipping investments than in household matters. When the couple moved permanently to their Charleston mansion in 1823, leaving the plantation in the hands of overseers, his visits to my domain became even rarer. But Mistress Cordelia came daily. No matter what social engagements occupied her calendar, she made time for laundry inspection. As the years passed, her scrutiny only intensified, as did her displeasure. Nothing was ever quite perfect enough. A sheet might be adequately pressed, but had I used the correct amount of bluing in the rinse? A dress might be spotless, but was the starch distributed with absolute uniformity? "You're slow today," she observed one stifling August afternoon in 1835. I was 38 by then, my youth spent in steam and lie. "Are you being deliberately lazy, or are you simply incompetent?" "Neither, mistress," I replied, keeping my eyes on the petticoat I was ironing. "The heat slows the drying. I'm working as quickly as possible." She made a small sound of disbelief and moved closer, watching my hands as they guided the heavy iron across the fabric. "You know they're bringing those new mechanical laundry devices up north," she said conversationally. "Steam-powered. They say one machine can do the work of 3s. I remained silent, recognizing the implicit threat. Machinery was expensive, but slaves could be sold. "Of course," she continued, trailing a finger along a shelf to check for dust. "Machines don't make mistakes. They don't talk back. They don't have troublesome monthly cycles that interfere with their work." This last was a specific barb. The previous week, my monthly bleeding had been particularly heavy, leaving me listless. I had dropped a basket of wet linens necessitating a re-wash. "No, ma'am," I agreed quietly. "Machines don't bleed." Something in my tone, perhaps a hint of the rage I struggled daily to contain, caught her attention. She stepped directly in front of me, forcing me to pause my ironing. "Look at me," she commanded. I raised my eyes to hers. This close, I could see the fine lines beginning to form at the corners of her eyes, the slight loosening of the skin beneath her jaw. At 39, Mistress Cordelia was fighting the first subtle signs of aging, applying creams and powders with the same perfectionism. She demanded of my laundry. "I see your father in your eyes," she said softly, venomously. "That same insolence. That same assumption that rules don't apply." I said nothing but held her gaze, unable to summon the deferential downward glance expected of me. Something had hardened in me over the years of her targeted cruelty. Not just the calluses on my hands, but a protective shell around whatever remained of my spirit. She smiled then, a cold curving of lips that never reached her eyes. "Perhaps I should mention to Mr. Blackwood that you're becoming difficult. He's been looking to invest in some new kitchen slaves. Your sale could fund quite a nice purchase." The threat of sale was her most potent weapon, not because I harbored any particular attachment to the Blackwood household. Indeed, I hated every brick of it, but because sale meant uncertainty. It meant potentially being sent to the Deep South, to the brutal cotton or sugar plantations, where life expectancy could be measured in months rather than years. Or worse, being sold to one of Charleston's brothels, where my light skin would be marketed as an exotic luxury. "I apologize if I've given offense, Mistress," I said, lowering my eyes at last. "It won't happen again." "See that it doesn't." She turned away, satisfied with this small victory. At the door, she paused. "The Rutledges are coming to dinner tomorrow. Their napkins must be perfect. The Egyptian linen, not the Irish. And make sure you use the lavender rinse, not the rose. Mrs. Rutledge gets a rash from roses." With that, she was gone, leaving behind the faint scent of expensive French perfume that always clung to her clothing. Another stain for me to preserve rather than remove when laundering her garments. That night, in the small room attached to the laundry house where I slept, I examined my hands in the dim light of a tallow candle. The skin was prematurely aged, crisscrossed with tiny scars from lye burns. The nails split and uneven, despite my efforts to maintain them. My mother had kept her hands beautiful somehow, even with her hard work. "A woman's hands tell her story," she used to say. What story did mine tell? One of labor without end, of small humiliations accumulated like the soiled linens that filled my washing baskets each morning. I had few possessions of my own, but beneath a loose floorboard, I kept 3 treasures: a scrap of blue ribbon my mother had once worn in her hair, a small carved wooden bird a kitchen boy had given me before being sold away, and a straight razor I had found discarded in the master's trash years before. The blade was rusted but still sharp enough to be dangerous. I had kept it not for any specific purpose, but as a talisman of sorts. A reminder that sharp edges existed in the world, that tools meant for white men's comfort could serve other purposes if necessary. That night, I took out the razor and tested its edge against my palm, watching as it raised a thin line of blood. I wasn't planning anything yet, not consciously, but something was shifting within me, like laundry in a boiling tub, the dirt slowly lifting from the fabric. The next morning brought new burdens. Not only were the Rutledges coming to dinner, but Mistress Cordelia was hosting her monthly meeting of the ladies, benevolent society, the following afternoon. The irony never failed to bite. These women gathered to discuss charitable works while being served by the very people they kept in bondage. Extra tablecloths needed washing and pressing. 20 napkins required perfect starching. The mistress's best tea gown had a mysterious yellow stain that took me nearly an hour to lift. By midday, the temperature in the laundry house had reached levels that made breathing difficult. Sweat poured down my face and back, stinging the small cuts on my hands as I worked. When Maria, one of the house slaves, brought me my midday meal, a bowl of leftover grits and a piece of salt pork, she lingered, fanning herself in the doorway. "Lord, it's hot as Satan's kitchen in here," she observed. "Don't know how you stand it day after day." I shrugged, too tired for conversation. Maria meant well, but she had the luxury of moving throughout the house, of experiencing different tasks, different rooms. My world was steam and soap, and the endless rotation of dirty to clean to dirty again. "Mistress is in a state today," Maria continued, lowering her voice slightly. "Master's brother is coming to visit next week, the one from Virginia." My hand stilled momentarily over my bowl. Master's brother. My father, though he had never acknowledged me as such. I had not seen him since childhood, when his occasional visits would leave Mistress Cordelia tight-lipped and irritable for days afterward. "She's having us clear out the blue guest room," Maria added. "Wants everything perfect. Says it needs to be aired for 3 days first. New mattress ticking, the works." I nodded, absorbing this information with an outward calm that belied my inner turmoil. What would he think, seeing me now, Would he recognize the child he had helped create, now a middle-aged laundress with ruined hands and graying hair? Would he care? The visit of my father loomed in my mind throughout the afternoon, distracting me from the precision my work demanded. By the time Mistress Cordelia arrived for inspection, my nerves were already frayed from heat and unwelcome emotions. She began her usual methodical examination of the day's laundry, finding fault with nearly every piece. The Egyptian linen napkins weren't starched firmly enough. A pillowcase showed the faintest shadow of a previous stain. Her own tea gown, despite my hour of careful work, apparently retained a hint of yellowing at one seam. "This is unacceptable," she declared, her voice tight with displeasure. "The Rutledges will be here in 3 hours, and these napkins are barely suitable for the kitchen staff. And what am I to wear if my gown is still stained?" "I can wash the napkins with extra starch," I offered, already calculating how to accomplish this alongside my other remaining tasks. "And perhaps the blue silk for your gown. It would complement the table settings." "The blue silk has a torn lace cuff," she snapped, "which you would know if you kept proper track of the garments in your care." "I mended the cuff last week, Mistress," I said carefully. "It's ready for wear." For a moment, she seemed caught off guard by this evidence of competence. Then her expression hardened again. "Fine. The napkins must be ready in 2 hours. No excuses." "Yes, Mistress." She turned to leave, then paused at the door. "And Eliza, when my brother-in-law arrives next week, you will make yourself scarce. I don't want him distracted by your presence." The implication was clear. My resemblance to the Blackwood family was not to be displayed before the very man responsible for it. The shame was not his for taking a slave woman, but mine for existing as the result. "Yes, Mistress," I said again, swallowing the bitter words that rose in my throat. After she left, I plunged the napkins into a fresh washing solution, adding the extra starch they would need to meet her standards. The water was scalding, but I barely felt it through the layers of calluses on my hands. As I worked, I found my thoughts turning increasingly dark, shaped by the heat and steam, and 18 years of accumulated injuries, both physical and spiritual. What if I didn't hide away when my father arrived? What if I stood before him, a living embodiment of his casual use of my mother? What if Mistress Cordelia had to face the physical evidence of her husband's family's depravity each day? Not just in my features, but in my very presence at the dinner table or in the parlor. Dangerous thoughts. Impossible thoughts. Yet once conjured, they refused to dissipate, lingering like steam in the closed confines of the laundry house. By evening, my required tasks were complete. Napkins starched to rigid perfection. Tablecloths pressed so smooth they shone in the lamplight. The blue silk gown ready for Mistress Cordelia's dinner with the Rutledges. But something had changed within me. The constant simmer of resentment that had been my companion for years had begun to boil, pushing against the lid of necessary subservience that had contained it for so long. The next 3 days passed in a blur of heat and labor. August in Charleston was always brutal, but this particular summer seemed determined to test the limits of human endurance. The temperature inside the laundry house regularly exceeded that of the air outside, creating a steaming inferno where I spent 12 to 14 hours daily. My only respite came in the brief hours of darkness when, exhausted beyond measure, I collapsed onto my small pallet in the attached room. On the 4th day, the day before Master's brother was due to arrive, Mistress Cordelia appeared for her afternoon inspection in an unusually agitated state. Her face was flushed, her movements sharp and erratic as she examined the day's washing. "These sheets for the blue room," she said, running her hands over the pressed linen with uncharacteristic roughness. They're not adequate. They must be re-washed. There's a shadow here and here. She pointed to areas where I could detect no imperfection whatsoever. Yes, mistress, I said automatically. I'll rewash them immediately. See that you do. She continued her examination, finding fault with nearly every item. And these handkerchiefs, the monogram is barely visible. Did you use the proper bluing? And this tablecloth is insufficiently starched. Really, Eliza, it's as if you're deliberately undermining my preparations for Henry's visit. I remained silent, recognizing that her agitation had little to do with the actual quality of my work and everything to do with her anxiety about her brother-in-law's arrival. Henry Blackwood's visits always unsettled her, disrupting her carefully maintained control over the household. Perhaps I should just replace you, she said suddenly, turning to face me with cold calculation. Find a laundress who understands the importance of perfection. The Harrisons are selling several of their house slaves next month. I could inquire about their laundress. The threat was not new, but its timing felt significant. After 18 years of service, of ruined hands and endless labor in conditions that would drive most to collapse, the idea that I could be so easily discarded kindled something dangerous in my chest. As you wish, mistress, I replied, keeping my voice level despite the rage building within me. Although it would take time for a new laundress to learn your specific preferences. She studied me for a long moment, perhaps sensing the change beneath my outwardly calm demeanor. Yes, well, we shall see. For now, rewash these sheets. I want them perfect by morning. The blue room must be immaculate for Henry's arrival. After she left, I stood motionless amid the damp laundry and rising steam, a strange clarity descending over me like cool water. 18 years. 18 years of criticism and threats and casual cruelty. 18 years of watching my youth disappear into the steam of copper washtubs, my hands transformed from smooth brown skin to gnarled, scarred instruments of labor. And for what? For the privilege of continuing this existence until I was too old or too broken to be useful. Until I was sold away like old Ruth, or simply worked until my body gave out completely. I moved to the largest copper tub, the one we used for bed linens and heavy items, and began preparing the water for the sheets Mistress Cordelia had declared inadequate. As I stoked the fire beneath, watching flames lick against the metal bottom, an idea began to form. Not fully shaped yet, more intuition than planned, but insistent nonetheless. The copper tub was large enough to accommodate a person. The water, when properly heated, reached temperatures that scalded unprotected skin. The laundry house's isolation from the main house meant sounds were unlikely to carry, especially on an August evening when windows remained closed against mosquitoes. I had never considered myself capable of violence. Even in my darkest moments of resentment, I had directed my anger inward rather than outward, accepting the bitter truth that open rebellion meant certain destruction. But something had shifted. The constant pressure had finally found a crack in my carefully constructed facade of submission. That night, as I lay on my pallet, attempting to find sleep despite the heat and the pain in my overworked hands, I allowed myself to fully imagine what had previously been only a formless impulse. Mistress Cordelia arriving for her inspection, the copper tub filled with water heated to the boiling point. A moment's inattention on her part, a sudden movement on mine. The splash, the scream, the lid coming down to contain both. The thought should have horrified me. Instead, it brought a strange peace. The calm certainty of a decision finally made after years of indecision. I would never be free of the Blackwood household through conventional means. I would never earn enough from occasional outside laundry work to purchase my freedom. I would never receive manumission, as a reward for loyal service. But I could end the torment, could claim one terrible moment of power after a lifetime of powerlessness, could ensure that Cordelia Blackwood's perfectly manicured hands experienced, just once, the scalding heat that had been my daily companion for 18 years. The morning of Henry Blackwood's arrival dawned hot and oppressively humid. I rose before first light as always to begin the day's work. But today was different. Today each task was performed with meticulous attention. Not out of fear of Mistress Cordelia's criticism, but to ensure nothing would interfere with what I had determined must happen. I prepared the largest copper tub with particular care, building the fire beneath it hotter than usual, adding the special soaps and bluing agents that would be needed for the final washing of the blue room sheets. The water would reach optimal temperature, just below boiling. By mid-afternoon, when Mistress Cordelia typically arrived for inspection, the hours passed with excruciating slowness. I completed my regular tasks automatically, my mind focused on the approaching moment. Linens were washed, dried in the August sun, brought in for ironing. Clothing was spot cleaned, pressed, folded. The endless cycle of clean and soiled and clean again that had defined my existence for so long. At midday, Mariah appeared with my usual meal, her expression harried. "The whole house is in chaos," she reported, setting down the bowl of food. "Mistress has changed her dress 3 times already, and Master's in a state about some business papers that need to be perfect before his brother sees them." "When does Mr. Henry arrive?" I asked, careful to keep my tone casual. "His carriage was spotted on the road from Savannah an hour ago. Should be here by late afternoon." She glanced at the copper tub, now steaming impressively. "Lord, that water looks hot enough to boil a person alive." The phrase sent a shiver through me, despite the laundry house heat. "It needs to be hot for the sheets," I said. "The bluing sets better that way." Maria nodded absently, already turning to leave. "I'd best get back. Mistress wants the silver polished again before they serve tea." After she left, I found myself standing before the copper tub, watching the steam rise in lazy spirals toward the ceiling. "Boil a person alive." The words echoed in my mind, making concrete what had previously been abstract. This was not a symbolic act I was contemplating, but a very real, very physical one. Could I actually do it? Could I actually take a human life, even one that had caused me such suffering? The answer came not in words, but in the memory of sensations. The sting of Mistress Cordelia's slap when I was 9. The burn of lye soap in countless small cuts on my hands. The ache of muscles pushed beyond endurance day after day. The hollow feeling of going to sleep hungry, after being denied meals as punishment for imagined deficiencies in my work. 18 years of small and large cruelties, of being treated as property rather than person, of watching my body age prematurely in steam and heat and constant labor. Yes, I could do it. More than that, I would do it. The afternoon crept forward, the heat in the laundry house building to almost unbearable levels as the copper tub maintained its rolling simmer. I had positioned everything carefully. The sorting table close to the tub, the pressing board on the far side of the room, creating a clear path between door and water. The blue room sheets were cleaned, dried, and awaiting final inspection on the table. When the door finally opened, admitting Mistress Cordelia in a swirl of expensive perfume and barely contained nervous energy, I was pressing handkerchiefs at the far table, my back to the entrance. I heard her steps pause just inside the door. "Good God, it's stifling in here," she complained. "Can't you open a window for heaven's sake?" "The steam would warp the window frame, Mistress," I replied, setting down my iron and turning to face her. Master was quite specific about avoiding unnecessary repairs. She made a dismissive sound, moving toward the sorting table where the blue room sheets awaited her approval. These had better be perfect this time. Henry's carriage has just arrived, and he'll want to refresh himself in his room before dinner. I watched as she leaned over the sheets, her critical fingers searching for any remaining imperfection, any shadow or wrinkle that might justify further complaint. Her back was to the copper tub now, exactly as I had anticipated. "The top sheet still shows signs of yellowing," she declared, straightening with an exasperated sigh. "Right here along this edge. Are you blind, Eliza, or merely incompetent?" "Let me see, Mistress," I said, moving to her side. "Perhaps it needs one final rinse in the bluing solution." She stepped aside as I leaned over the sheet, making a show of examining the area she had indicated. "Yes, I see it now. The last batch of bluing must have been weaker than usual, but the tub is ready." I gestured toward the steaming copper vessel. "It will take only a few minutes to correct." "Well, hurry up then," she snapped. "I need these sheets on the bed within the hour. Henry is very particular about his accommodations." "Yes, Mistress," I agreed, gathering the sheet in my arms. "It should only take a moment. Would you mind checking the temperature of the water? It needs to be very hot, but not quite boiling, for the bluing to set properly." It was a request I had never made before. Mistress Cordelia did not assist with laundry work. She merely inspected and criticized. But her anxiety about her brother-in-law's visit had disrupted normal patterns, making the unusual seem momentarily acceptable. She hesitated, then moved toward the copper tub, peering at the steaming water with a slight frown. "It looks more than hot enough to me. If you could just test it with your finger," I suggested, moving directly behind her with the sheet still bundled in my arms, to be certain it won't damage the linen. She leaned forward, extending one perfectly manicured hand toward the water's surface. I don't see why I should have two. The moment her position was perfect. Balanced forward over the tub's edge, her attention focused on the water, I moved. Dropping the sheet, I placed both hands firmly and between her shoulder blades, and pushed with all the strength 18 years of hard labor had built in my arms. She fell forward with a startled cry, arms flailing instinctively to break her fall. But there was nothing to grab, nothing to stop her momentum. She plunged face first into the near, boiling water with a splash that sent scalding droplets flying across the laundry house floor. Her scream was immediate and terrible, a sound I had never heard from a human throat before, raw with shock and agony. She thrashed in the water, trying desperately to rise, to escape the burning heat that enveloped her. For a moment I stood frozen, horrified by what I had done, yet unable to stop what was now in motion. Then, as she began to gain purchase on the tub's edge, her reddened face emerging from the water as she gasped and screamed, I moved again, grabbing the heavy wooden lid we used to cover the tub when maintaining water temperature. I brought it down hard on her head, forcing her back beneath the surface. Her struggles intensified, water sloshing violently over the tub's edge as her body fought against drowning and burning simultaneously. I leaned my full weight onto the lid, holding it firmly in place despite her frantic attempts to push it upward. Her screams were muffled now, distorted by water and wood, but still audible in the closed confines of the laundry house. 18 years, I said aloud, though I don't know if she could hear me through the water and her own pain. 18 years in this heat, with these tubs, with your voice finding fault with everything I did. Her struggles began to weaken, the violent thrashing gradually subsiding to sporadic movements. Still, I maintained pressure on the lid, unwilling to risk her survival, her testimony against me. You threatened to sell me away, I continued, my voice strangely calm despite the horror of what was happening beneath my hands. After everything I've done, after all the years, like I was nothing, like my life meant nothing. The movement beneath the lid had almost stopped now. Just occasional twitches, the body's last instinctive attempts to survive even as consciousness faded. "My hands," I said, looking down at them where they pressed against the wooden lid. Mama always said a woman's hands tell a story. What story will they tell now? Mistress. When the movement finally ceased entirely, I remained in position for several minutes longer, ensuring there would be no revival, no final gasp of life. Only when I was certain Cordelia Blackwood was truly dead did I carefully lift the lid. The sight that greeted me was barely recognizable as human. The near boiling water had done its work, scalding flesh red and blistered, distorting features beyond recognition. Her fine silk dress billowed around her in the water, the expensive fabric now a shroud for the body it had adorned in life. I replaced the lid, sealing away the evidence of my terrible act. Then, with the methodical precision that had defined my work for 18 years, I began cleaning the water and soap that had splashed onto the floor during her struggles. No detail could be overlooked. No trace left to connect me to what had occurred. When the floor was clean, I built up the fire beneath the copper tub, bringing the water to a full rolling boil. The final phase of laundering, of eliminating stains. The most stubborn stains always required prolonged heat, as I well knew from years of experience. As the water boiled, I gathered my few possessions. The blue ribbon, the wooden bird, the straight razor I had never used. These I wrapped in a clean cloth and tucked into the pocket of my dress. Then I sat on my small stool in the corner of the laundry house, watching steam rise from the copper tub, and waited. I would be discovered eventually. A laundress leaving her post would be noticed. Mistress Cordelia's absence would raise alarms. Questions would be asked. The laundry house searched. The horrific contents of the copper tub revealed. But for now, for this brief interval between action and consequence, I was neither slave nor fugitive. I existed in an inn between state, a woman who had seized control of her fate through one terrible, irrevocable act. A woman whose hands had finally written their own story in letters that could never be erased. The copper tub bubbled and steamed in the center of the laundry house, the lid occasionally rattling slightly as pressure built beneath it. Like a pot of water left too long on the stove, forgotten until it boils over. 18 years, and Cordelia Blackwood had never noticed the pressure building in her laundress, the human vessel she had pushed too far, too long, until something had to give. Now she boiled, and I watched, and somewhere beneath the horror of what I had done, I felt something I had almost forgotten existed, the sense of having chosen my own path, regardless of where it might lead. The wait was shorter than I expected. Less than an hour after Mistress Cordelia's struggles had ceased, a sharp knock came at the laundry house door. "Eliza." It was Maria's voice, tense with urgency. "Eliza, are you in there? Mistress is missing, and Master Henry is asking for her." I rose from my stool, moving to block the copper tub from immediate view should she enter. "I'm here," I called, just finishing the blue room sheets. The door opened, and Maria's worried face appeared. "Have you seen Mistress?" She said she was coming to check the sheets, but she never returned to the house. Master James is beside himself, with his brother just arrived and no wife to play hostess. "She was here," I confirmed, my voice steadier than I had expected it to be. "About an hour ago. She checked the sheets but said they needed one more wash. Then she left. Said she needed to change her dress before meeting Master Henry." The lie came easily, born of years of small deceptions necessary for survival in a household where truth could be dangerous. Maria looked uncertain, glancing past me to the steaming tub. Are those the sheets in there now? They'll never dry in time for Master Henry to use them tonight. Different batch, I said quickly. The blue room sheets are drying in the sun. They'll be ready within the hour. She seemed to accept this explanation, her attention already turning back to the crisis in the main house. Well, if you see Mistress, tell her to come quickly. Master James is in a state, and the cook doesn't know whether to delay dinner or serve on schedule. I'll tell her, I promised, knowing I would never have the opportunity to deliver such a message. After Maria left, I moved to the window, watching as she hurried back toward the main house. Soon there would be more searchers. House slaves first, then perhaps field hands if Mistress Cordelia remained missing long enough. Eventually, someone would insist on searching the laundry house more thoroughly than Maria's cursory glance. I had perhaps an hour before discovery became inevitable. An hour to decide my next actions. Running was the obvious choice to flee immediately, using the confusion of Mistress Cordelia's disappearance as cover. But where would I go? A black woman alone, with no free papers, no permission to travel. I would be stopped at the first checkpoint, returned to the Blackwood household. Or, more likely, thrown into jail once my connection to the missing mistress was discovered. No. Running without preparation was merely another form of suicide. I looked again at the copper tub, still bubbling ominously in the center of the laundry house. What if there were no body to discover? What if, like the most stubborn of stains, all evidence could be dissolved away, leaving nothing but clean fabric behind? The thought was as horrifying as it was practical. Yet I had come too far now to balk at one final terrible act. If I was to have any chance at escape, at a life beyond these walls, there could be no proof of what I had done. I stoked the fire higher beneath the copper tub, bringing the water to a violent boil. Then, steeling myself against what must be done, I lifted the lid. What remained bore little resemblance to the proud, beautiful woman who had tormented me for 18 years. The boiling water had done its work, flesh separating from bone, features dissolving into unrecognizable elements. I will not describe the specific procedures that followed. Some acts are too gruesome for recounting. Some memories best left unexamined, even in the privacy of one's own thoughts. Suffice to say that by the time the search for Mistress Cordelia extended to a full inspection of the laundry house, some 2 hours later, there was nothing to find. The copper tub contained only water and the harsh lye soap we used for the heaviest cleaning. The floor was immaculate. The blue room sheets were pressed and folded, ready for delivery to the main house. And I stood amidst it all, hands raw from work and water and worse things, face composed into the mask of subservience I had perfected over decades of servitude. Search everything. Master James instructed the house slaves who accompanied him. His face was tense with worry, his manner distracted. Every corner, every cupboard. She must be somewhere. They searched me thoroughly but found nothing suspicious. The laundry house was as it always was, hot, humid, filled with the smells of soap and starch and steam. Eliza. Master James turned to me finally. When exactly did you last see Mrs. Blackwood? Around 2 hours ago, Master. I replied, eyes downcast in the proper position. She came to check the blue room sheets, but wasn't satisfied with them. Said they needed washing. Then she mentioned changing her dress before meeting Master Henry and left. He studied me for a moment, perhaps noting something unusual in my demeanor, but his concern for his wife overrode any suspicions about a slave he had barely noticed in all my years of service. If she returns here, send word to the house immediately, he instructed before leading the search party back toward the main house. Alone again, I sank onto my stool, the enormity of what I had done finally crashing over me in waves. I had killed a woman, had dissolved her body in the copper tub, where I had washed her linens for 18 years, had lied to her husband's face about her whereabouts. Each act alone was enough to condemn me. Together, they represented a point of no return. Whatever happened next, I would never again be the person I had been before this day. That woman, the obedient laundress who had endured endless criticism and cruelty with downcast eyes and bitten tongue, was as gone as Mistress Cordelia herself. In her place was someone new, someone capable of calculated violence, of clinical disposal of evidence, of direct lies to the master of the house. Someone dangerous. The search for Mistress Cordelia continued throughout the evening and into the night. Lanterns bobbed across the property as slaves, and neighboring white men alike combed the grounds, checked the road to town, inquired at friends' houses where she might have gone. Theories multiplied. She had suffered an attack of nerves upon her brother, in-law's arrival, and sought solitude. She had gone to make a last-minute purchase for dinner and met with an accident. She had been abducted by runaway slaves or criminals from the docks. No one suggested she might be dead. No one looked at the laundress's red, chapped hands and imagined what they had done. I continued my work through the chaos, delivering the blue room sheets to the house, returning to the laundry to finish the day's regular tasks. To stop, to deviate from routine in any way, would draw attention I could not afford. So I washed and ironed and folded, as I had every day for 18 years. The familiar motions a strange comfort amid the turmoil of my thoughts. As night fell fully, I finally retired to my small room attached to the laundry house. I had no plan yet, no clear path forward. Only the certainty that I must eventually flee. But flight required preparation money, papers, some destination in mind. None of these I had. All I possessed were my 3 small treasures and the terrible knowledge of what the copper tub had witnessed. Sleep, when it finally came, brought dreams of boiling water and dissolving flesh, of Mistress Cordelia rising from the copper tub like a vengeful spirit. Her features melted away, but her voice still perfectly intact, calling my name with the same critical edge she had used in life. I woke before dawn, as always, to begin the day's work. The routine was so ingrained that my body moved automatically, lighting the fires, pumping fresh water, preparing the soaps and starches needed for the day's laundry. Only when everything was in motion did I allow myself to think again of what had happened and what must happen next. The day brought new developments. Master Henry, rather than departing as might be expected during such a family crisis, took charge of the search efforts with an intensity that suggested deep suspicion about his sister-in-law's disappearance. He organized the house and field slaves into search parties, had the grounds methodically divided into sections for thorough inspection, sent riders to Charleston to enlist the police in the investigation. She wouldn't simply vanish. I overheard him telling Master James as they passed near the laundry house. Cordelia was many things, but not impulsive or careless. Something happened to her, James, and I intend to discover what. His conviction sent a chill through me. Master Henry was not a man to be easily deterred or deceived. If he truly dedicated himself to uncovering the truth, how long before his attention turned to the laundry house and its solitary occupant? By midday, the search had expanded to include dragging the small decorative pond on the property and checking nearby wells and cisterns. The theory of accident or misadventure was gaining prominence. Perhaps Mistress Cordelia had fallen, hit her head, tumbled into water, and drowned. No one seemed eager to consider more sinister possibilities. No one except Master Henry. He appeared at the laundry house door shortly after noon, his tall figure blocking the sunlight, his face set in grim determination. Unlike his brother, Henry Blackwood had always paid attention to the slaves in his household. Not from kindness, but from a practical recognition that they observed much that their white owners missed. "Eliza," he said, stepping inside and closing the door behind him. "I need to speak with you about yesterday." I set down the iron I had been using, keeping my expression carefully neutral. "Yes, Master Henry, you were likely the last person to see my sister-in-law," he stated, his eyes moving methodically around the laundry house. "Tell me again exactly what happened during her visit here." I repeated the story I had given Master James, keeping details consistent. Mistress Cordelia's dissatisfaction with the sheets, her mention of changing clothes, her departure toward the main house. "And that was all?" he pressed. "Nothing unusual in her manner? No visitors or other interruptions during her time here?" "No, sir. Just the usual inspection." He nodded slowly, still examining the laundry house with careful attention. His gaze lingered on the copper tub, now filled with fresh linens and gently simmering water. "That's a substantial piece of equipment," he observed. "For the larger laundry items, I assume." "Yes, sir. Sheets, tablecloths, curtains. Anything too large for the smaller tubs." He moved toward it, looking down at the steaming water. "How hot does the water get?" The question sent a spike of fear through me, though I kept my face impassive. "Hot enough to remove difficult stains, sir. But we're careful not to let it actually boil when linens are in it. That can damage delicate fabrics." "I see." He continued his circuit of the small building, examining tables, shelves, the flat irons arranged by size near the pressing board. "And the waste water? Where does it go when you're finished with a batch?" "There's a drainage channel beneath the floor, sir. It carries the water out to the ditch behind the laundry house, which eventually feeds into the creek at the edge of the property." This was dangerous territory. If he decided to examine the drainage system, would he find traces of what had been washed away yesterday? I had been thorough in my cleaning, but had it been thorough enough? "Interesting," he murmured, then turned back to face me directly. "Eliza, did my sister-in-law ever mention being afraid of anyone? Having conflicts with anyone in Charleston?" The question caught me off guard. "Not to me, sir." "Mistress Cordelia didn't confide in the laundress?" "No. I don't suppose she would." A hint of something like bitterness colored his tone. Cordelia always did maintain strict divisions between herself and the household staff, even at our family plantation in Virginia. He fell silent for a moment, and I wondered if he was thinking of the other divisions that had been crossed. The ones that had resulted in my existence. Did he know, or suspect, that his brother had been my father? Did he see the family resemblance that Mistress Cordelia had so despised? "Well," he said finally, "if you recall anything unusual, anything at all about yesterday or the days preceding, I expect you to come directly to me." He reached into his pocket and withdrew a small object. "I'm staying in the blue room. Do you know which one that is?" "Yes, sir." "Good. Come to me directly if any memories surface, no matter how insignificant they might seem." He placed the object on the sorting table. "And this is for your assistance." I glanced down and saw a silver dollar gleaming against the rough wood. Payment for information, or perhaps a test of my character. "Thank you, sir," I said, not touching the coin. "But I've told everything I know." He studied me for another long moment, his expression unreadable. Then he nodded once and left, the door closing firmly behind him. The silver dollar remained on the table, catching the light that filtered through the laundry house windows. Blood money, in a sense. Payment for the lies that protected my terrible secret. I needed money if I was ever to escape Charleston. This single coin wouldn't be enough, but it was a start. After a moment's hesitation, I picked it up and added it to my small collection of treasures beneath the floorboard. Whatever taint might cling to it, necessity outweighed principle. The search for Mistress Cordelia continued for 3 more days with diminishing intensity. No trace was found. No clothing, no personal items, no signs of struggle anywhere on the property. It was as if she had simply vanished while walking from the laundry house to the main house, leaving no evidence of her passage or her fate. Master James, initially frantic with worry, gradually subsided into a confused grief that manifested as aimless wandering through the house and grounds. Master Henry, by contrast, became more focused and determined as the days passed without discovery. Someone knows something. I overheard him telling the Charleston police investigator, "A woman doesn't disappear without a trace unless someone has deliberately removed that trace." His suspicions, though justified, had not yet fixed on me specifically. But how long before they did? How long before some small detail? A scrap of lace that had survived the boiling, a button that had fallen unnoticed onto the laundry house floor. Connected. Mistress Cordelia's disappearance to her laundress. On the 4th night after the murder, I made my decision. I had accumulated a small store of resources, the silver dollar from Master Henry, a few coins earned from occasionally doing extra laundry for neighboring households, the straight razor that might serve as both tool and weapon if needed. Not much, but perhaps enough to get me beyond Charleston, to some place where a solitary black woman might find work and anonymity. I would need papers, however. No slave could travel openly without permission from their owner or documented proof of freedom. Fortunately, the chaos of Mistress Cordelia's disappearance had disrupted normal household routines, including the careful storage of important documents. While delivering clean linens to the main house, I managed to locate a folder of household papers in Master James's study. Inside were various documents, property deeds, bills of sale for slaves including my own from 18 years prior, and, most importantly, several blank forms that required only a signature to grant a slave permission to travel on their owner's business. I took one of these forms, along with a sample of Master James's signature, from another document for reference. Forgery was yet another crime to add to my growing list, but surely a minor one compared to what I'd already done. That night, in the dim light of a candle's stub, I carefully forged Master James Blackwood's signature on a travel permission form, authorizing the bearer, Eliza, Laundress, to travel to Savannah to obtain special laundry, supplies not available in Charleston. The document gave me 2 weeks for the journey there and back, more than enough time to disappear completely, to travel north or west to someplace where no one knew of a missing Charleston mistress or her skilled laundress. With the forged papers hidden in my dress and my few possessions wrapped in a small bundle, I prepared for flight. One more day of normal routine to avoid suspicion. One more night to ensure the household was settled, and then I would slip away before dawn, taking advantage of the early morning darkness to put distance between myself and the scene of my crime. That final day proved to be the most difficult. Every knock at the laundry house door seemed to herald discovery. Every glance from another house slave appeared knowing, suspicious. The copper tub, now returned to its mundane purpose of washing linens, seemed to accuse me with its very presence. But no one knew, no one suspected. I was just Eliza the laundress, as I had been for 18 years, going about my duties with the same quiet efficiency I had always shown. If my hands trembled occasionally, if my responses to questions came slower than usual, These small changes went unnoticed amid the greater disruption of Mistress Cordelia's disappearance. As night fell, I completed my final tasks: washing, ironing, folding, delivering. Everything in perfect order, just as Mistress Cordelia would have demanded. One last act of deference to the woman I had killed. The mistress who would never again find fault with my work. I retired to my small room as usual, but did not sleep. Instead, I sat on the edge of my pallet, waiting for the household to quiet, for the last movements of slaves and masters to cease. Midnight came and went. 1 o'clock, 2. By 3 in the morning, the Blackwood estate was silent, wrapped in the deep stillness of pre-dawn. It was time. I gathered my small bundle, tucked the forged travel papers securely into my bodice, and opened the door of my room. The laundry house was dark, illuminated only by the faint moonlight filtering through the windows. The copper tub stood as it always had, innocent and practical in the dimness. For a moment, I paused beside it, laying one scarred hand on its curved metal edge. This object that had been both the instrument of my oppression and the means of my rebellion. This tub where I had dissolved away not just a human body, but the last vestiges of my own subservience. Goodbye, Mistress, I whispered to the empty tub, to the ghost that surely lingered somewhere in this room. The stain of you is gone now. Then I turned away, moving silently toward the door and the world beyond. Whatever waited for me outside Charleston, freedom or capture, life or death, would be of my own making. For the first time in 38 years, my hands would write their own story. I stepped into the darkness, leaving behind the steam and the soap and the copper tub with its terrible secret. The night air felt cool against my skin after so many years in the laundry house heat. Above me, stars scattered across the sky like water droplets on fresh, pressed linen. Ahead lay an unknown path, fraught with danger, but no longer defined by another's will. I had boiled my mistress alive in the wash tub, had dissolved her body until no trace remained, had lied and forged and prepared for flight. Each act a choice, made not by the obedient laundress I had once been, but by the woman I had become in the heat and steam of that August afternoon. A woman capable of terrible things in pursuit of the most fundamental human desire, freedom. As I moved away from the Blackwood estate, following the road that led eventually to the Charleston docks, where I might find passage elsewhere, I felt Mistress Cordelia's presence one last time, not as a vengeful ghost, but as a final lesson learned too late, that even the most powerful among us can be reduced to nothing more than dirty water down a drain. This was the story of Eliza, the laundress who, in the humid summer of 1835, finally snapped under decades of abuse and boiled her mistress alive in the copper wash tub. She was never found, having disappeared from Charleston the night of her escape. Legend says she made it to Philadelphia and lived out her days as a free woman, though she was haunted by nightmares of boiling water and steam, until her death in 1868. The Blackwood family never discovered what truly happened to Cordelia, though her brother-in-law, Henry, maintained until his death that she had been murdered by someone in the household. The copper tub remained in the laundry house for many years afterward, used by slaves who never knew its terrible history. The echoes of Eliza's desperate act resonate through time, a stark reminder of the brutal measures born from unimaginable oppression. If these untold stories of defiance and survival stir your soul, join our community. Subscribe to witness more hidden truths from the shadows of American slavery. Your support helps us keep these powerful narratives alive.